Dear friends, welcome to our channel. We are delighted to share different stories of love and betrayal from around the world with you. So now, let's begin today's story journey. My husband is just a loser, without even basic male dignity. Valentina announced loudly at a gathering of family and friends, and everyone laughed. Elias stood in the corner of the room, his glass hardly touched. His expression unchanged, he quietly watched how his wife belittled their 17-year marriage in front of everyone. The room was filled with laughter from the upper society of the coastal town of Santander, mostly Valentina's colleagues and so-called friends. As the laughter gradually subsided, Elias walked across the room, calmly approached Valentina, said nothing, and simply handed her an envelope. The people around watched curiously, thinking this might be a gesture of a husband giving in. Valentina opened the envelope with a victorious smile, but when she saw the paternity test results inside, discovering that their child was not Elias's at all, she fell to her knees, pale-faced. "Please don't tell anyone," she begged in a trembling voice. The gathering instantly fell silent. Elias just turned and left, without looking back. 20 years ago, when Elias met Valentina, her beauty and ambition were as impossible to ignore as an Atlantic storm. At that time, he had just taken over the management of the North Point Lighthouse, while she was an ambitious insurance agent who had just come to Santander looking for greater opportunities. They met at a maritime safety seminar. Elias gave a presentation on reef warning systems as a local channel expert, while Valentina attended representing her company. During the cocktail party afterward, she took the initiative to introduce herself, her conversation full of urban sophistication and charm. "You know this sea area like the back of your hand," she admired, her eyes sparkling with a light Elias couldn't interpret. "That's very valuable in our industry." After 3 months of passionate romance, they got married. Elias's colleagues were surprised, wondering how this quiet lighthouse manager could win such a dazzling urban woman. But Elias didn't care about their opinions. He believed in their feelings. The first year after marriage seemed perfect. Valentina quickly adapted to small-town life, while rapidly advancing in her insurance company. In the second year, she announced her pregnancy, and Elias was overjoyed. When Alba was born, he felt his life had reached its peak. However, as time passed, Valentina's dissatisfaction with small-town life began to show. She frequently went on business trips, claiming to expand business. Each time she returned, she brought a longing for city life and disdain for their quiet existence. "Don't you feel your abilities are being wasted here?" she often asked Elias. "Just watching the lights stay on, guiding those lost ships." Elias tried to explain the importance of lighthouse work and his love for the job, but Valentina never truly understood. To her, success meant status, money, and power. The differences between them deepened over the years. As Alba grew, Elias spent a lot of time with his son. He taught Alba to recognize constellations, understand ocean tides, and took him fishing by the sea. However, Valentina's attention to her son diminished daily, with more of her energy focused on her career and social circle. "He needs a better educational environment." When Alba was 12, Valentina insisted on sending him to a boarding school in the city, despite Elias's strong objection. "This is for his future, Elias. Do you want him to be like you, guarding a lighthouse for his entire life?" Elias eventually compromised, but he would drive to the city every week to visit Alba, ensuring his son knew he was loved. Meanwhile, Valentina's connection with the family grew increasingly sparse. Her world seemed to consist only of work and her upper-class friends. 6 months ago, Elias never thought his marriage would end this way. As the local lighthouse manager, his job was to ensure ships safely passed through this dangerous sea area. The reefs and hazardous channels of the northern Spanish coastline were a nightmare for many sailors, and Elias was the guardian of these waters. In the early morning, Elias stood at the top of the lighthouse, watching the sunrise in the east. He had just finished his night shift and was preparing to go home. In the distance, a cargo ship was slowly entering the port. Through his binoculars, he saw the captain standing on the deck, Matteo, a familiar face who frequently traveled this route. Elias didn't like Matteo, though they had only met a few times. There was an arrogance about the man, who refused the help of pilots every time he entered the port, declaring that he knew these waters inside out. More disgusting was how Matteo treated his crew, roughly and disrespectfully, as if he were a dictator at sea. Elias had heard dock workers talk about how Mateo abused his subordinates when drunk, and how he left a string of disputes and debts in various ports. "Another arrogant fool," Elias muttered to himself, putting away the binoculars. "One day he'll make a serious mistake." Mateo's ship, the Star of the Ocean, docked at this port every month to load and unload cargo. As a medium-sized cargo vessel, it typically transported goods from North Africa to Europe. According to port records, in the past 2 years, this ship had reported an unusually high number of cargo losses and insurance claims. As the lighthouse manager, Elias had access to this information, but he had never paid special attention to it until recently. Returning home, he found Valentina already up and preparing for work. As an executive at a maritime insurance company, she was usually busy all day. But today she seemed particularly hurried, not even kissing him as usual. "Good morning," Elias said. "Important meeting today?" Valentina just nodded, not looking up at him. "New client case. Might have to work until very late." Elias noticed that her attire today was more carefully chosen than usual, and she had changed to a stronger perfume. "Should I prepare dinner?" "No need. I'll eat at the company." Valentina grabbed her bag and left hurriedly. Elias watched her leave in silence. 17 years of marriage had made him familiar with every small habit of his wife, and these subtle changes were triggering alarms in his mind. Their son, Alba, was 16 and studying at a boarding school in the city, only coming home on weekends. Despite Elias's irregular working hours, he had never neglected his family. Whenever he wasn't on duty at the lighthouse, he made sure to spend time with his family. He attended all of Alba's football matches, helped him with schoolwork, and taught him about the sea and the stars. But in the past 2 years, Valentina's interest in family life seemed to be gradually diminishing. Initially, Elias thought it was just a manifestation of her work pressure. However, the recent sense of estrangement made him consider deeper reasons. That night, Elias accidentally discovered several strange emails on their shared computer. Valentina had forgotten to log out of her account, and the screen displayed a series of email exchanges related to a cargo ship named Star of the Ocean. This was Mateo's ship. The email contents were puzzling: modifications to cargo manifests, adjustments to insurance amounts, and some vague arrangements. One particularly caught Elias's attention. "Dear Valentina, regarding next Friday's shipment, I've modified the declaration list according to your suggestion. The valuation has been increased by 30%, which should earn more compensation. Looking forward to meeting at the usual place to discuss details. Always loving you, Mateo." As an insurance company executive, Valentina would naturally deal with various vessels, but the tone of these emails was too personal, even intimate. More disturbing was that this email clearly suggested some form of insurance fraud. Elias didn't confront her immediately. Instead, he began to pay more attention to Valentina's whereabouts and behavior. He noticed that she often claimed to be working overtime, but her car wasn't in the company parking lot. She started changing her phone password frequently. Most disturbingly, her care for Alba had noticeably decreased, and she wasn't even home the entire weekend during their son's recent visit home, citing work as the reason. Elias decided to investigate deeper. Using the lighthouse's record system, he checked all the sailing records and declaration documents of the Star of the Ocean for the past 2 years. To his shock, this ship had encountered an unusually high number of accidents during past voyages: cargo losses, equipment failures, sailing delays, and each time there was corresponding insurance compensation. More suspicious was that these accidents were never serious enough to require a maritime safety investigation, always just within the range of being able to obtain insurance compensation without attracting too much attention. Through the lighthouse's monitoring system, Elias also discovered that Mateo had a serious drinking problem. Multiple records showed that he had started drinking when the ship approached the port, seriously violating maritime safety regulations. However, he always seemed to recover to a normal state before official inspections, or somehow evaded checks. A month later, Elias got confirmation. He ended his lighthouse shift early and unexpectedly saw Valentina's car parked outside a hotel near the port. In the same parking lot, Mateo's rental car was not far away. Elias didn't rush in immediately, but chose to wait. 2 hours later, he saw Valentina and Mateo leave the hotel together, their behavior intimate, clearly not just business partners. That night, Elias didn't make a scene, but began planning his next move. As a lighthouse manager, he had all the information about coastal channels, including dangerous reefs known only to locals. At the same time, he also noted Mateo's drinking problem, having seen him start drinking before docking multiple times. In the following weeks, Elias systematically collected more evidence. He installed a hidden recording device in their home, recording several phone conversations between Valentina and Mateo, clearly involving insurance fraud and their personal relationship. He also obtained testimonies from Mateo's crew through friends at the port, confirming the captain's drinking problem and inappropriate behavior. However, the most shocking discovery for Elias was about Alba. During a routine medical checkup, the doctor mentioned that Elias had a rare blood type, and people with this blood type could not possibly have children with Alba's blood type. This accidental discovery raised Elias's suspicions. He secretly did a paternity test, and the results confirmed his worst fear. Alba was not his child. Thinking back to when Valentina became pregnant, it was just when she had started working at the insurance company, when she frequently traveled to other port cities. Now he realized she might have already known Mateo or someone else at that time. This discovery completely destroyed Elias's last illusion about their marriage. He realized that Valentina had not only betrayed him, but had been deceiving him from the beginning. He felt an unprecedented anger and determination, planning how to make the betrayers pay. Just 2 weeks after discovering the truth, they attended that party that changed everything. Valentina was showing off and belittling him as usual, but this time Elias decided not to endure it silently. "We need to improve your social skills, Elias," Valentina said to a group of people at the party. "He's been at the lighthouse too long. He no longer knows how to communicate with people." The surrounding people let out polite laughter. "You know what?" she continued, her voice slightly slurred from alcohol. "Sometimes I wonder if he prefers that lighthouse to me. At least the lighthouse doesn't complain about his low salary." The laughter grew louder. "My husband is just a loser, without even basic male dignity." That sentence became the last straw that broke Elias's patience. He walked up and handed her that envelope. The day after the party incident, Valentina returned home to find Elias sorting through his belongings. "We need to talk." Her voice no longer had its usual arrogance, replaced by anxiety and fear. "Nothing to talk about," Elias calmly replied, continuing to pack his things. "It was a mistake, Elias. I drank too much. I don't know why I said those things about you." Valentina tried to explain, but she knew last night's humiliation was just the surface issue. "We both know the problem isn't what you said last night." Elias stopped his work and looked directly into her eyes. "The problem is that Alba is not my child, and you've deceived me for 16 years. The problem is that you're now maintaining a relationship with Mateo, a drunken captain whom you're helping commit insurance fraud." Valentina widened her eyes in surprise. "How do you know? Does it matter?" Elias interrupted. "I've already contacted a lawyer. The divorce papers will be delivered tomorrow. As for Alba, I will continue to support his education. He doesn't need to know the truth. I won't agree to a divorce." Valentina suddenly raised her voice. "You don't have evidence to prove anything. Who do you think they'll believe, a lonely lighthouse keeper or me?" "I have enough evidence to prove your fraudulent behavior with Mateo, as well as your improper relationship," Elias responded coolly. "I don't want to make this public, but if you obstruct the divorce, I'll hand everything over to the police and your company." Valentina's face changed. "You can't do this. Think about our social circle, my work, my reputation. You should have thought about these things when you decided to betray me." Elias shook his head. "I give you 2 choices. Either divorce quietly, and I promise not to disclose anything, or fight to the end and face all consequences yourself." Valentina was silent for a moment, then changed to a pleading tone. "Elias, we can solve this problem. I know I made a mistake, but we've been together for 17 years. We can't end like this. Think about Alba. He needs a complete family. Don't bring Alba into this," Elias said coldly. "You never truly cared about him. These 17 years have all been a lie, Valentina. You deceived me about the most basic thing, my child. Now you expect me to believe you've suddenly found your conscience." "People make mistakes, Elias," Valentina said softly. "Give me a chance to make amends." "No," Elias answered simply and directly. "I've decided. No second chances, no reconciliation. We are over." That evening, Elias moved out of their shared home and temporarily into a small apartment near the lighthouse. In the following weeks, Valentina repeatedly tried to contact him, sometimes apologizing, sometimes threatening, but Elias's determination didn't waver. Meanwhile, he began to execute his plan. As the lighthouse manager, he had access to records of all ships entering and leaving the port. He carefully checked the Star of the Ocean's navigation logs, discovering multiple suspicious cargo declarations and insurance claims. More importantly, he found evidence of Mateo's multiple instances of drunk sailing. The lighthouse's surveillance cameras recorded everything. In the following month, Elias organized all the evidence and carefully formulated a plan. He would neither directly report Valentina and Mateo nor simply let them go. What he wanted was a more precise revenge, a way to make the betrayers reap what they had sown. Elias knew his revenge needed precise calculation, like navigation, where one wrong step could lead to disaster. He waited for the perfect moment, just as a lighthouse waits for lost ships. Night fell, and the Atlantic wind wrapped rain against the lighthouse glass. Elias stood at the top of the lighthouse, staring at the distant lights of the approaching Star of the Ocean. The weather forecast showed strong winds tonight, but not dangerous. However, for a drunk captain, even mild swells could cause disaster. Elias contacted Mateo via radio. Star of the Ocean, this is North Point Lighthouse. According to the weather forecast, I recommend you detour via the South Channel to enter the port. Roger, North Point Lighthouse. Mateo's voice sounded slightly slurred. But we'll take the regular channel. I'm very familiar with this route. I don't recommend that, Captain. Tonight's undercurrent is strong, and I said we're taking the regular channel. Mateo interrupted, his tone full of annoyance and confidence. I've been sailing this route for 10 years. I don't need your guidance. This was exactly the response Elias had anticipated. Mateo's arrogance and disregard for rules had always been his characteristics. According to lighthouse records, he had ignored safety warnings and navigation advice multiple times in previous voyages, avoiding disaster only by luck. But tonight, luck would no longer be on his side. Elias put down the radio and walked to the lighthouse's control system. Under normal circumstances, the lighthouse's strong light and warning signals would guide ships away from dangerous reefs and shoals. But tonight, he made a crucial adjustment, turning the warning light pointing to the most dangerous reef area by 45 degrees. This subtle change wouldn't be noticed by people on shore, but for vessels relying on these signals for navigation, it meant they would be guided into dangerous waters, especially those captains who refused to use port pilots and were overly confident. Elias knew this move involved serious professional ethics issues. As a lighthouse guardian, his duty was to protect the safety of all navigators. But tonight, he chose a different path. This wasn't just revenge against Mateo, but also a warning to all those who, like Mateo, relied on privilege and deception to gain improper benefits. In the past few weeks, Elias had carefully studied the Star of the Ocean's sailing patterns and Mateo's behavioral habits. He knew, according to records, that Mateo often started drinking when approaching the port, especially on nights when he expected smooth docking. He also knew that despite Mateo's claims of knowing these waters inside out, he actually mainly relied on automatic navigation systems and lighthouse signals, especially when sailing at night. Star of the Ocean, please confirm your route again. This is the last warning. Elias warned one last time through the radio. We're sailing as planned, lighthouse keeper. Just keep your lights on and leave the rest to real sailors. Mateo's response was full of sarcasm and disdain. Elias took a deep breath, walked to the lighthouse window, and his gaze followed the distant approaching ship. He turned on the recording equipment, recording all radio communications. This would be key evidence proving he had dutifully warned, while also recording Mateo's arrogance and disregard for safety advice. Through high-powered binoculars, Elias could clearly see the Star of the Ocean's bridge. Mateo stood there, one hand on the wheel, the other holding what appeared to be a bottle of alcohol. Even under such dangerous sailing conditions, he was still drinking. Elias took a photo of this scene with his phone as additional evidence. The ship continued along the regular channel, but due to the changed lighthouse signal, it was gradually deviating from the safe route, heading towards the dangerous reef area. Elias calculated the time and distance, counting down in his mind. Based on his knowledge of these waters, if Mateo didn't change course immediately, in about 15 minutes, the Star of the Ocean would hit the main reef outside North Point. During these 15 minutes, Elias repeatedly tried to contact Mateo via radio, warning him that the ship was deviating from the safe channel. But each time he was arrogantly rejected or ignored. As the ship approached the danger zone, Elias issued an emergency alert signal, the standard procedure for lighthouse managers in extremely dangerous situations. Star of the Ocean, emergency. You're heading towards dangerous reefs. Turn immediately. Repeat, turn immediately. This time, Mateo finally seemed to realize the danger. What? But the lighthouse signal shows this is a safe channel. His voice revealed panic. The lighthouse signal may be affected by weather. Adjust your course immediately according to my instructions. Elias answered, deliberately providing a possible explanation. But it was too late. The bow of the Star of the Ocean violently struck a hidden reef, making a loud noise. Even through binoculars, Elias could see the hull starting to take on water, with crew members rushing towards life-saving equipment in panic. Elias immediately activated the emergency rescue procedure, contacting the Coast Guard and port rescue team. At this moment, his sense of duty overcame his vengeful impulse. Regardless of how Mateo and Valentina had betrayed him, he wouldn't let innocent crew members suffer because of it. 2 hours later, piercing alarms broke the night's tranquility. The Star of the Ocean had hit the reef outside North Point. The hull was damaged and taking on water. The port immediately dispatched rescue vessels. All crew members were safely evacuated, but the ship and cargo suffered severe damage. After the rescue operation, Elias received initial investigators at the lighthouse. He provided all communication records, proving he had repeatedly warned Mateo about the dangerous channel and weather conditions, but all were ignored. He also provided photos of Mateo sailing while intoxicated. According to procedure, we need to check all lighthouse equipment to ensure they were functioning normally when the accident occurred, the investigator said. Of course, Elias replied calmly, while starting the system's self-check procedure. All systems are operating normally, with no fault records. He knew that at the moment the self-check began, the lighthouse's control system would automatically reset all settings, including the signal direction he had previously adjusted. No one could prove that subtle 45-degree deflection had ever existed. The next morning, Elias was called to attend the accident investigation meeting. As the lighthouse manager, he was a key witness. According to preliminary investigations, Captain Mateo is suspected of sailing under the influence at the time of the accident, the investigator said. His blood sample shows alcohol content far exceeding the legal limit, but he insists the lighthouse guidance signal had problems. Elias remained calm. All lighthouse systems were functioning normally. We have complete operation logs to prove it. He handed over a document. Also, I'd like to submit some other evidence. He brought out all the materials collected over the past 6 months, surveillance videos of Mateo sailing while intoxicated multiple times, and some documents showing the Star of the Ocean might be involved in insurance fraud. These documents showed the ship had repeatedly reported cargo losses, while these goods were either never loaded or their value was greatly exaggerated. All these insurance applications were processed by Maritima Internacional Company, specifically by Valentina, Elias added, with no emotional fluctuation in his voice. I have reason to believe these applications involve systematic insurance fraud. The investigators exchanged surprised glances. Isn't Valentina your wife, Mr. Elias? Yes, we are in the process of divorcing, Elias replied calmly. Precisely because I discovered the fraudulent activities she was conducting with Captain Mateo. The investigation quickly expanded into the area of insurance fraud. Evidence showed that Mateo and Valentina had been collaborating for a long time, obtaining huge insurance compensation through falsely reporting cargo losses. Deeper investigation revealed this wasn't individual behavior, but an organized fraud network involving several other vessels and insurance company insiders. For Mateo, the accident caused by drunk sailing was the end of his career. His sailing license was revoked, and he faced huge compensation claims and criminal charges. In court, he tried to shift responsibility to a malfunction in the lighthouse system, but without any technical evidence to support it, this defense seemed pale. especially when his blood test results showing excessive alcohol content and his previously recorded multiple instances of drunk sailing were presented. Valentina's situation was equally bad. As the investigation deepened, her years of fraudulent behavior at the insurance company were exposed one by one. She had not only collaborated with Matteo to deceive her own company, but was also involved in many other insurance fraud cases. The company immediately suspended her and launched an internal investigation. How could this happen? After one interrogation, Valentina stopped Elias, who was about to leave. How could you do this to me? We were in love. We have a son. Elias looked at her coldly. Love? You know nothing about love, Valentina. All you know is how to use people's feelings to get what you want. As for Alba, he is not my child, but I will still ensure he doesn't suffer because of your mistakes. It's all a misunderstanding, Elias. Valentina tried to explain. Between Matteo and me, it was just a business relationship. Those emails were taken out of context. As for Alba, the doctor might have made a mistake about the blood type. We can do another test. It's already been done, Elias replied calmly. Paternity tests don't lie, Valentina. Just like photos and recordings don't lie. You planned all this, didn't you? Valentina suddenly changed her attitude, her eyes full of anger and accusation. You deliberately guided Matteo's ship to hit the reef. You can't do that. It's criminal. I just did my job, warning a captain sailing under the influence about dangerous channels. If there's any evidence showing I violated procedures, feel free to present it. Elias smiled slightly, knowing she couldn't prove anything. As the investigation continued, more scandals about Valentina and Matteo were exposed. They weren't just business partners and lovers, but core members of an organized insurance fraud network. For years, they had used their positions to manipulate cargo lists and insurance claims, defrauding millions of euros in compensation. A month later, the divorce proceedings were completed. The court, considering Valentina's involvement in criminal offenses, awarded Elias the vast majority of their joint property, including their house in the suburbs. But he decided to sell it, seeking a new beginning. Why did you have to do this? Valentina asked at the final court hearing. If you had divorced quietly, no one would have known these things. We could have lived our separate lives. This isn't about divorce, Valentina, Elias answered. This is about consequences. Every choice has consequences. You chose betrayal and deception. Now you face those consequences. When he was packing his belongings for the last time, Valentina came to the house. She looked haggard, her once arrogant attitude gone. You ruined everything for me, she said, her voice full of bitterness. Elias paused his work, looking at the woman who was once his wife. No, Valentina, you chose this path yourself. Every deception, every betrayal was your choice. I can change, Elias. Give me a chance to prove I can be a better person. Valentina pleaded, tears glistening in her eyes. It's too late, Elias replied coldly. Some things, once done, cannot be undone. Trust is like glass, Valentina. Once broken, it can never be fully repaired. What about Alba? He's still a child, Valentina asked. I've already spoken with him. He will continue his education at boarding school. I will pay all expenses. As for the rest, that's between you and him. Did you tell him the truth? Valentina asked nervously. No, that's your responsibility, if you choose to. But I told him we are no longer a family, and I am no longer his father. Although Alba was not his biological son, Elias still cared about this child. He didn't want Alba to suffer because of his parents' mistakes. However, he also clearly knew that continuing to pretend to be a family that never truly existed would only bring more harm. Valentina was silent for a moment, then asked, You did it on purpose, didn't you? That night's lighthouse signal. Elias didn't answer directly, only saying, Everyone must be responsible for their own actions, Valentina. Matteo chose to sail while drunk. You chose fraud and betrayal. These were all your own choices. When she left, Elias felt a strange relief. 17 years of marriage, built on lies and betrayal, had finally ended. Though he had lost much, he had also gained truth and dignity. A few days later, Elias moved to a small town inland, far from the coast and his past life. He bought a small house there and began his retirement. Occasionally, he would receive news about Valentina and Matteo. Matteo lost everything, not just his sailing license, but also his reputation and future job opportunities. He was burdened with huge debts and had to move back home to live with his parents. There were rumors that he began to drink heavily, becoming a laughingstock in the small town. As for Valentina, after her trial ended, she was sentenced to 3 years in prison, but being a first-time offender, the judge gave her a suspended sentence. However, she had to repay all fraudulently obtained amounts, complete community service, and be subject to regular supervision. Her career was completely ruined. No insurance company would hire someone with a fraud record. It was said she tried to rebuild her relationship with Alba, but he felt deeply disappointed and betrayed by his mother's actions. When he finally learned the truth from Valentina, he was shocked and chose to distance himself from both parents. After completing his education, he moved to Barcelona, rarely contacting either Elias or Valentina. In his new life in the small town, Elias gradually found peace. He joined the local reading club, began learning gardening, and even tried painting. Away from the sea and lighthouse, he discovered other aspects of life. But he never tried to establish an intimate relationship with anyone. That trust had disappeared with Valentina's betrayal. Sometimes, in the quiet of night, Elias would recall the early days of their marriage, those days that seemed full of hope and love. But now he understood that even then, everything might have just been an elaborately designed scam. Valentina may never have truly loved him, but was attracted to his stable position as a lighthouse manager and his complete trust in her. 6 months later, Elias received a letter from Alba. In it, the young man expressed his confusion and pain, but also indicated understanding for Elias's decision. He wrote, "Although biologically you are not my father, you gave me fatherly love as I grew up. I hope one day we can rebuild some kind of connection, not as father and son, but as friends." Elias replied, welcoming Alba to contact him anytime, but also clearly stating he needed time and space to deal with past events. He didn't want to completely cut ties with Alba, but he also didn't want to pretend everything could go back to how it was. One quiet afternoon a year later, Elias sat on his new home's porch, reading a book. His phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Is this Elias?" a strange female voice asked. "Yes," Elias answered. "I'm the Human Resources Director at Marittima Internacional. We're conducting an internal investigation regarding the cases of Valentina and several other former employees. There are some questions we hope to get your help with." Elias was silent for a moment, then said, "I've left that life behind. I understand, but this is very important for the integrity of the insurance industry. We need to ensure similar things don't happen again. Your testimony might help us expose a larger fraud network." Elias thought for a moment, then agreed. He knew this wasn't about revenge, but justice. Although he had distanced himself from that world, he still believed everyone should be held accountable for their actions. After the investigation concluded, Elias learned that Valentina and Matteo were just part of a larger fraud network. The network involved multiple insurance companies and shipping enterprises and had been operating for years. His testimony helped authorities arrest several main suspects, including several of Matteo's business partners who had long participated in similar fraudulent activities. Shortly after this investigation ended, Elias happened to see Matteo's name in the news. The former captain had injured a pedestrian while driving drunk and was sentenced to imprisonment. This seemed to be the final station on his self-destructive path, a once proud captain, now an imprisoned alcoholic. As for Valentina, Elias heard she had left Santander after completing her community service and moved to a small apartment in Madrid. She found a low-paying clerical job, far from the insurance industry. Some said she tried to contact Alba, but was rejected. Her life had completely changed from the past, from a successful executive to an obscure office worker, bearing the stigma of fraud. One day, Elias received an unexpected email. It was from Valentina, with the subject apology. He hesitated, then opened the email. Valentina wrote that she finally understood her mistakes and hoped to be forgiven. She claimed these difficult years had given her deep reflection, and she was now a different person. She asked Elias to consider giving her a chance, even if just as friends. Elias read the email but didn't reply immediately. He thought about it all day, then wrote a brief response. "Valentina, I will not accept your apology, and I cannot forgive you. Not because I don't believe people can change, but because some damage has been done beyond repair. I wish you well in your new life, but our paths have completely diverged. Please do not contact me again. Elias." After sending the email, he felt a final release. He didn't need hatred to define himself, but he also didn't need to pretend to forgive or rebuild relationships that were completely broken. After hanging up the phone, Elias continued sitting on the porch, looking at the distant mountains. He was no longer the lighthouse guardian, no longer needed to guide others away from danger. Now, he only needed to navigate for himself, finding inner peace. The sound of the waves had gone, but the lessons remained clear. Betrayal will eventually bring consequences, whether at sea or in life. Elias didn't regret his choices, nor did he feel remorse for Valentina and Mateo's fates. Everyone must be responsible for their choices, just as every ship must find its own course in the storm. In this inland town, far from the coastline and the past, Elias found a new beginning. No forgiveness, no reconciliation, just the determination to look forward. After all, life is like sailing. Sometimes you must discard some things to avoid sinking. While tidying his room, Elias found an old photograph taken when he first took over the lighthouse. In the photo, a young him stood at the top of the lighthouse, with endless sea and sky as the background. He remembered the feeling then: responsibility, pride, and expectation for the future. That young man wouldn't know what awaited him, but Elias wouldn't change anything. Every experience, no matter how painful, shaped who he is now. He placed the photo on the bookshelf as a memento of his past life. Not nostalgia, not regret, just accepting it as part of his life journey. In the evening, Elias planted several fruit trees in the garden. These trees would take years to bear fruit, but he wasn't in a hurry. He had time to wait, to watch them grow, just as he now had time to develop his new life. No Valentina, no lighthouse, no shadow of lies. Only peace and authenticity, a clear sky left after the storm. If this story resonated with you, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more wonderful content. Looking forward to seeing you in our next story.